Once you have determined that an agency relationship exists, you then need to determine the liability that flows from that relationship. In the agency context, that means determining where the cause of action lies, whether in tort or contract, and then apply the applicable liability rule. This module looks at the liability of a principal in contract. The liability rules for a principal in contract are found in the third restatement 6.01 to 6.03. We'll be looking at 6.01 for purposes of this short video because it is very similar to 6.02 and 6.03, and you gotta start somewhere. Remember, agency is about how one person is responsible for the actions of another person. So we're not talking about a contract entered into by a person directly. Contract law covers that. Instead, this covers a contract entered into by an agent of the principal, and we're trying to hold the principal responsible. You'll see 6.01 states that when an agent acting with actual or apparent authority makes a contract on behalf of a disclosed principal, 1, the principal and third party are parties to the contract, and 2, the agent is not a party to the contract unless the agent and third party agree otherwise. So to analyze this rule, we need to break it down a little further. The key parts are this: the actual or apparent authority, and the disclosed principal. When we look at the idea of actual or apparent authority, there are really two types that we will examine. First is actual authority, then there's apparent authority. Within actual authority, there are two types: express actual authority or implied actual authority. Both of these stem from the principal's instructions to the agent and the agent's interpretation of these instructions. Express actual authority is a situation where, assuming I'm the principal and you're the agent, you do exactly what I told you to do. Cross the room. Implied actual authority. You did exactly what I told you to do, but there were some logical blanks in my instructions that you had to fill in order to do exactly what I told you to do, such as cross the bridge that is over the river that cuts through the middle of the room in order to cross the room. Apparent authority stems from the third party's impression rather than what the principal told the agent. So you look at the information flow for determining whether something's apparent authority. This third party's impression can either be given directly by the principal or indirectly by things like industry custom. The other part of the definition that we need to break down is the principal type. 6.01 dealt with a disclosed principal, but there are two other types. So in addition to a disclosed principal, we have an undisclosed principal and an unidentified principal. The type of principal matters, or more precisely, as you can see from these different types, the exposure of that principal and whether or to what degree that principal is known to the third party matters. A disclosed principal is one where the third party knows the existence and identity of that principal when dealing with the agent. An undisclosed principal, the third party does not know the existence, let alone the identity of the principal when dealing with the agent. And finally, an unidentified principal, the third party knows the person or agent that they are dealing with is acting on behalf of a principal, but they just don't know the identity of that principal. And finally, Rule 6.01 to 6.03 in the restatement outline the liability for the agent and principal and third parties in each of these situations where you have a disclosed, undisclosed, and identified principal. And you need to have all, for each of these definitions, for liability rules, you need to have both the authority and the type of principal to come up with the ultimate liability rule.